It was a horror story that gripped the nation. Jennifer and Sarah Hart had adopted 6 kids. Then Jennifer drove the family off a California cliff at 90 miles an hour. When we first brought you this story, we were still struggling to make sense of it all. Why would a mother do this? What was the motive? Today you'll hear exclusive interviews and new insight that may help answer why this tragedy happened. Let's take a closer look at the Hart family.
Is an overturned vehicle 1124.
That's the California Highway Patrol reporting on the crashed SUV of Jennifer and Sarah Hart, mothers to 6 adopted children.
No sign of anybody around it.
The vehicle plunged 100 feet over these cliffs along the Pacific Coast Highway.
There's a lot of unknowns on this. However, we do know several things. We know that an entire family vanished.
Jennifer and Sarah Hart began adopting children in 2006. The couple were described by some friends as free-spirited, open-hearted moms, known for raising their own food and taking their family to music festivals and political gatherings, seen here on old social media posts. Yet some also describe a darker side. In 2011, while they were living in Minnesota, Sarah Hart pleaded guilty to assault and the malicious punishment of a child after a teacher discovered bruises on their 6-year-old daughter. Sarah admitted to police she had let her anger get out of control. After that, the family began homeschooling. In 2014, a photo of the couple's son, Devante, hugging a white police officer during a Black Lives Matter rally went viral. The couple claimed racist backlash from the attention led them to withdraw from public life. Then the family moved to this house in Woodland, Washington. Their neighbors Dana and Bruce DeKalb say they remember Devante coming to their door requesting food. The couple reached out to Child Protective Services, and the Friday before the deadly crash, a CPS worker came to the Hart family home. No one answered. The worker departed. And the next morning, so did the Hart family. Now, nearly a year later, the Hart family tragedy is still unfolding. Police just recently identified the remains of a 5th child from the deadly crash. Abuse, lies, and unanswered questions, all part of a story that ended 100 feet below the scenic Pacific Highway cliffs. Writer Liz Egan and features director at Glamour magazine Justine Harman are the co-hosts of Broken Hearts, the podcast about this tragedy. They join me now. Liz, you were initially drawn to this story because you found the women relatable. I just wanted to understand that a little better.
I first read a headline about this story when I was on a very long road trip with my own kids. I have 3, 2 teenagers, 1 tween. And I read the headline that a family of 8 had gone over a cliff in California. I was intrigued because, of course, I had just spent the day in the car with my own kids who were bickering and complaining, and I assumed they had been on a road trip also. And when I saw pictures of Jen and Sarah Hart, I was immediately drawn to them because they looked like people I might know. And in fact, I logged into my own Facebook account and looked up their names to see if I had friends in common with them. I did not, but I continued to follow the story, and what surprised me the most was how quickly it disappeared from the headlines. It was such a terrible tragedy, and it didn't seem to get the attention that I thought it deserved.
Justine, walk us through the dynamic between these 2 women who do seem relatable when you see them on social media, but they're much more complex.
So they met in college in Aberdeen in South Dakota, and they were inseparable to begin with. And friends of theirs from back then sort of described the dynamic as Jen was the outgoing one and Sarah was a little more reserved. But as time went on and as they, adopted more and more children, it seemed that the differences between them, the disparity between those personalities really grew at Delta, and Jen was the alpha, and it does appear that Sarah was a little bit more of a traditional sidekick. And the kids even said when some of the abuse allegations came out that Sarah used to push back, and toward the end she stopped. And so, I'm not a doctor, but it does seem that they are playing 2 very different roles in how this family was reared.
How did people react to the blended family aspect of this?
Well, these women moved the children from Houston, which is a very diverse area, to very secluded suburban areas. And a lot of the neighbors we spoke with discussed that, you know, they didn't want to appear politically incorrect. They didn't want to appear intolerant or racist. And they had a hard time understanding where the line is between being respectful of a family that doesn't look like your own and turning a blind eye. And I do think the blended element, you know, 2 gay moms, 6 black kids, a lot of people were hands off on that and didn't want to appear to have an opinion that might not jibe with that lifestyle. And I think it was really important to what happened here.
Yeah, I never thought of the possibility that being politically correct or conscious of your own potential bias may have actually led to these kids being ignored.
Yeah, I mean, we live in this faux post-racial society where people want to believe that we live in a time and a place where we're equal, and these conversations are no longer needed. But it's the lack of these conversations that can really contribute to some really horrible things. So I think it's a hard thing to talk about, and it's a hard thing to address. But we're hoping with this podcast, Broken Harts, that we're able to shed a light on some of these harder and more difficult conversations.
And it also stimulates another idea in me, which is maybe these moms purposely went to places where they were clearly different from everybody else, so that they would be left alone. Because if they moved to a major urban area where people might be more connected to this lifestyle, they probably would have had people asking them questions, poking at them a little bit. You go to a rural part of the country where no one looks like you.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And neighbors, Bill Groner, who lived next door to them in Westland, Oregon, said as much. And Woodland, Washington, where they lived right before they went off the cliff, is 0.3% black.
0.3%?
0.3%. So there really wasn't anyone to confide in, to relate to. It's all, I mean, hindsight is 2020, but it all feels very intentional to keep these children from being able to reach out, from being able to connect, from being able to have any sense of autonomy. So it is pretty sinister.
All right, we'll be right back. We're back investigating the mystery surrounding one of the most tragic stories of the last year. Jennifer Hart, whose blood alcohol level was over the legal limit, drove her partner Sarah and their 6 adopted children off a cliff. Why did she kill her family? The Broken Harts podcast is investigating every angle of this tragedy. Hosts Justine, Harman, and Liz Egan are back. So Justine and Liz talked to several people who considered themselves part of the Harts' inner circle, including a photographer who immediately after the tragedy defended the women that she thought she knew. Take a listen.
They were that really bright kind of presence. It was pretty hard to miss them. Any event that I was at where they were, if I had a camera, I was of course attracted to that. I was inspired by them. They gave me hope. Everyone considered them like the Hart tribe.
Even now, Zippy has a hard time believing her friends were living dual lives.
There's no part of me and all of my looking back at my observations of them that's capable of seeing that it was just a charade.
All right, so Liz, Jen and Sarah have 6 adopted kids that we know of, but it wasn't the first time that they were parents. That I didn't realize. They had a foster daughter. Can you tell us that story?
They had a foster daughter when they were in their 20s, and the foster daughter reported in she only gave one interview. She prefers to remain anonymous. She remembers that one day they drove her to a therapist's office. They dropped her off. They never came back. And she was taken from the therapist's office to another foster family where her belongings were already in the house. It had been planned ahead. She had no idea. So right there, you have to look at that treatment of another human being and think, that is so incredibly cruel.
I'm stunned that the system would tolerate that degree of cruelty. Because it's not just the mothers dropping this child off and not looking back, it's the fact that there was a system that supported that, right? The therapist had to take her in, another foster family had to accept her, the clothes were delivered without her.
It's astounding.
It's brutal.
It's unconscionable.
But I'm thinking, why would they give those 2 mothers more children?
Exactly.
Why roll the dice again, right? Doesn't that seem to be an obvious question you'd ask, unless you didn't know what was happening? So Jen and Sarah will go on to adopt 6 kids in 3 years. 6 kids.
Yep.
In an exclusive interview on our show, the Harts' next-door neighbors, Dana and Bruce, told us about an exchange with one of the kids when he came over to ask for food. He was asking for food. This is just days before they were killed. These are all the questions that I understand you asked. Are they feeding you? What did he say?
That he said they withhold food as punishment. And it used to only be a meal at a time, but now that it was going for days at a time.
Are they abusing you?
And he said yes.
He said he was being abused. Question I'm asking, what you're all thinking is, how is this possible? How could we have tolerated this? The people that are supposed to be in charge, how did these women get away with this? Justine, what role did race play?
I think race played a very big role in what unfurled over the course of a decade. Shonda Jones, who was the attorney for the second set of siblings, said that in her 22 years as an attorney, she'd never felt a tenor like the one she felt in the courtroom, where she was trying to help their biological aunt maintain custody of these children. She felt their mind was made up that these two white women in Minnesota were just more suited to raising these children than their own biological family. And white privilege is so apparent here, and the fact that they were able to mask such a horrible legacy of abuse based on the fact that they look passable or look like someone you can know on Facebook. This is really intrinsic to what they were able to pull off, whether it was intentional or whether it's just capitalizing on a lot of the issues that plague our society. And so I do think the juxtaposition between their whiteness and the blackness of these children cannot be ignored. And we've received some criticism about the fact that we are two white women telling this story, but it's a story that's worth being told. And I understand the criticism, but I also really think that at the end of the day, there are 6 kids who died, and to honor them and to recognize some of the issues that led to that tragedy is it's vitally important.
I come to this story as a mother, having had 3 kids in 6 years and almost losing my mind at the time. I know the desperation of having a bunch of kids who are little and overwhelming. The idea that they were able to adopt 6 kids in 3 years, which is essentially 3 sets of twins in a row, you just have to wonder how that happened.
Up next, the Harts choose to live off the grid. They chose that, yet lived much of their lives on social media. Could their social media presence have played a role in the tragedy? Stay with us. We're back investigating the mystery surrounding one of the most tragic stories of the last year. Jennifer Hart, whose blood alcohol level was over the legal limit, drove her partner Sarah and their 6 adopted children off a cliff. Why did she kill her family? The Broken Hearts podcast is investigating every angle of this tragedy. Hosts Justine Harman and Liz Egan are back. So Justine, the Harts lived off the grid, right? Yet they're all over social media.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem that they match up that well.
You would think that, but effectively everyone who knew them in their real life says that what they saw online corroborates the Harts they knew. And Zippy Lomax, who we heard from earlier, said the same. They were very good at curating a version of familial bliss that existed both online and in person. And I do think creating that myth across all platforms really prevented them from ever being able to go off track and say, actually, no, we're having a problem, or we're having difficulty raising these children, because they reaffirmed this narrative so many different ways. And the abuse lived in such an underbelly. And we've gone back, thousands of posts we've looked at, and there really is no wrinkle. There's no aha moment where you're like, oh, that shows that something sinister was happening. It was a very well curated reality in a way, and it's something that I think a lot of us do, maybe perhaps subconsciously.
It makes the hypocrisy that much deeper.
For
and
sure.
It leaves me even more questioning what happened. We've been struggling for a year now. We all have in this whole country, understanding why did these women do this. So let's come back with me. Let's go through the main theories that you looked into. The first is terminal illness. And I'm curious what made you go there, because this didn't come out in an investigation. I would have thought we would have known that someone had, brain cancer or something.
At one point, Jen Hart took about a 6-month hiatus from Facebook. And when she returned, in her status update explaining her absence, she mentioned the word cancer. She listed a whole bunch of reasons why she had taken some time off from Facebook. So of course we became curious about whether Jen or Sarah had cancer, whether they had a terminal illness that might have scared them and made them do this. We did not turn up anything along those lines in our investigation.
So it's probably not that, probably.
No.
Let's go to number 2, which is a common issue we have across the country, financial problems.
The Harts had about $20,000 worth of debt. They lived on one salary of $45,000 a year. For a family of 8, that's not a huge amount of money. A lot of people feel financial stress and don't drive their family of 8 off a cliff.
So I look at these problems, I'm still left with this last one of mental health. And I don't even know where to put my arms around this, but it seems that there's something going on inside of their minds. So Justine, what have you uncovered? Is there a diagnosis we have?
We don't have a diagnosis, but someone close to the family does say that there always was some indication that there was something going on with Jen, that there was an undiagnosed mental illness. But we don't have, I can't come out and say, the DSM says this. We haven't seen any evidence that she was in therapy or taking medication, but something's not right.
Maybe she should have been in therapy and taking medication.
Perhaps.
This case is still ongoing in California. I'm surprised that police are still trying to figure out, is this a homicide or not? What's left to find out?
Well, they still don't have a cause of death on the death certificates of these children and on Jen and Sarah Hart. And in March, to mark the 1-year anniversary, they're going to hold what's called a coroner's inquest, which is something that hasn't been done in Mendocino County, where they died in 50 years, according to the sheriff. And it's basically a jury of civilians determining whether this was an accident, a crime on behalf of one person or on behalf of 2 people. And in so many ways, that's the end. That's what is stamped on the death certificate, and that is how these deaths will be ruled.
So what's the lesson here? What's the message from this tragedy? What do we learn?
To me, it's twofold. The first is that we need better communication between states about child abuse charges. When Jen and Sarah moved from Minnesota to Oregon, the state of Oregon should have been made aware in some way. There should be a national registry of child abuse so that you can't just pick up stakes and move someplace else when you have some marks on your record. And the second thing is more personal. It's that I'm personally trying to take a step away from the screen, away from exclusively interacting with certain friends through social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, and actually looking out my window and seeing the people who live in my neighborhood and the actual friends who I have in real life, and to build that community rather than putting so much focus, as Jen Hart did, in building this fable online.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate both your insights and the hard work that you put into researching this case. Since our story first aired, the bodies of Jen, Sarah, and 5 of the children have been found and identified. The only one still listed as missing is 15-year-old Devontae Hart. He's the young boy who famously hugged a police officer at a rally protesting Ferguson police. To learn more about the Hart family and exclusive details about what happened that tragic day, check out Glamour's podcast, Broken Hearts. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out on new videos to live the good life.